Well, this was certainly interesting while it lasted. It's been a fair old while, but after its longer than intended hiatus, welcome to yet another episode of the Street Track Failures series. And it's fair to say that as soon as this circuit was no longer utilised, all of you desperately wanted to see a video on this thing. And what a thing it was! I am of course talking about the Nashville Street Circuit. This was used to create the Music City Grand Prix for the Indycar series, which held 3 rather docile races from 2021 to 2023. Okay, I know there isn't a face cam, but I cannot complete that last sentence with a straight face. Yeah, docile isn't at all the word that I would use to describe the action that occurred on this circuit. It played host to some of the most insane races, depending on what angle you look at it from, that Indycar has had over the past decade. But how did we get here in the first place? Indycar had attempted several times to try and hold a street race in Nashville, after racing at the Nashville Superspeedway concluded for the series in 2008. But on the 16th of September in 2020, it was announced that a new street event would take place. It was being privately funded by some pretty big star names, Dale Earnhardt Jr. and Justin Timberlake to name a few. Yet at the same time, it was being billed as the biggest race of the season. Ignoring the Indy 500 obviously. It would be a particularly important event for Joseph Newgarden, who is from Nashville, but also said when this was announced, "I think people in Nashville will see something they've never seen before." And I think it's fair to say that he hit the nail on the head there. The track would be designed by Tony Kottman, the same person who designed the Baltimore circuit. I'm sure some of you will have your thoughts on that. The course that was constructed was certainly a very unique one. It would be an 11-turn circuit that consisted of 7 corners to the left and 4 to the right, at a distance of 2.17 miles / 3.49 kilometers in length. However, I think it's about time that we took a look at this course in more detail. Although we'll actually start this analysis at the finish line, which may sound a bit backwards for those of you who don't know this circuit, but trust me on this one. Across the finish line you go, next to the Tennessee Titans NFL Stadium on your right, but you have barely any time to go into tourist mode as you have a nasty and narrow left-right chicane sequence coming up. Threading the eye of a needle, it's almost impossible to get overtakes completed through there, with the vague exception being on starts and restarts, where large bottlenecks tend to occur, stacking cars up alongside one another. Also, it would be very plausible to get stuck in the tyre barriers at this place. Coming out of the right-hander, it's then a fast kink to the left, which isn't actually designated as an official turn for some reason. Eventually we'll get a clearer picture of what counts as a corner and what doesn't. However, whilst the kink isn't a difficult corner, it's important to get as far to the left hand side wall as possible, as it best sets you up for the fairly fast 70-degree right-hander. It's an important corner considering the enormous straight that comes after it, but that doesn't mean you can take any liberties, either with clipping the inside wall or losing the rear end on the exit. And it also doesn't help that it's very bumpy there as well. A good exit off the corner though means that you'll be in a good spot to try and make an opportunity for an overtake on the straight that goes across one of this track's main party pieces, going over the Korean War Veterans Memorial Bridge. Now, bridges on racetracks are nothing new necessarily. I mean, we've had previous tracks in this series that have included a bridge. However, what makes this one in particular stand out amongst the others is that it's a rather large bridge, both in terms of how high it is above the water and also in terms of how long it is. It goes over the Cumberland River, and towards the end of the straight, you'll be reaching speeds of over 160 miles an hour. Now, to be honest, personally, whilst I thought this was a very cool feature in terms of a spectacle, and also how the long straights it provided did improve the chances for passing on the circuit, I wasn't quite as convinced as perhaps some others, who thought that a car would end up in the river below. Now yes, wheel-to-wheel contact in single-seater race cars can lead to some dramatic moments, but it would have had to have been some enormously freak circumstances for a car to climb an incredibly tall catch fence, then somehow have not lost enough momentum to have gotten over the permanent wall on the bridge. Even by this circuit's rather bonkers standards, that would have been incredibly unlikely. I'm not going to say it was totally impossible, but even so, had a car have gone into the large body of water, rescue teams were on standby in the Cumberland River for just such an eventuality. Can't imagine it would have been the most exciting time though if you were one of those people there. Coming off the bridge, you have a fast sweeping right-hander, which you would be able to take flat out if it weren't for the fact that you've got to brake incredibly hard for the following 90-degree left-hander immediately afterwards. Yet that fast sweeper wasn't the easiest of corners to get right, on account of the fact that it was particularly bumpy between the transition of the bridge to the road. A bump that would catch some people out, particularly seeing as you're braking midway through said corner, which would loosen up the rear of the car. It would also lead to moments where the term heart in your mouth doesn't even come close to describing the sketchiness level of said moment. A downhill braking zone towards turn 7 leads you to one of the better passing opportunities on the track, but at the same time it also leads to a place where botched up passing opportunities occurred, leading to some cautions. And that's not even taking into account how this corner was tricky on its own, particularly with how the wall on the exit somewhat sticks out on the exit. Meanwhile, turn 7 is the beginning of what in my opinion is one of the most awkward sections of racetrack that I've ever seen in my life. It just feels like this section was here just because there was no other option. An immediate hairpin at turn 7 that led you straight back to the other side of the bridge was maybe not possible because of the Indycar steering lock, and maybe other roads weren't plausible either, so this was the best of a less than ideal set of options. Even so, the right-left flick of turn 8 might just be the tightest portion of racetrack that has ever existed. Do not even think about going through this corner side by side. It isn't happening. Well, not unless you want to make car and wall contact along the way. Turn 9 is a slow 100-degree left-hander, which had the possibility of causing near track blocking pile-ups thanks to bottlenecks. Another 100-degree left-hander follows immediately afterwards, where the width starts to increase once again, but maybe not open enough to prevent near track blocking pile-ups from happening. Transition from the right-hand wall to the left-hand wall as quickly as you can to get the best entry line possible for turn 11, which is a 90-degree right-hander. Although you could use the extra track width to be a bit cheeky and get up the inside of the competitor in front of you. Then it's down the other side of the Korean War Veterans Memorial Bridge. Again, the long straight means that it's possible to get a good slipstream off the car ahead and overtake them at the next corner at turn 1. Wait, turn 1? We just completed turn 11 about 10 seconds ago. Well, you see, as you come off the bridge, you go across where the start line is, and from 2022, where all the restarts would take place. However, the corner that comes up after this is perhaps the most difficult on the track to get right. You approach the 90-degree left-hander with a lot of speed off the bridge, but need to stay as close to the right-hand side wall as you can, as the road arcs gently to the right-hand side. And with a bumpy braking zone that causes cars to get unsettled, this was a tricky corner, especially given the high speeds that you were travelling. There was also another feature about this corner that made it rather noteworthy. Whilst we've looked at this track's very narrow nature, the entry to this corner is one of the widest on the track, and a racing driver thinks that they can use this extra width to their advantage. So we get moments like this where overtakes have a less than desired impact on at least one driver. Clean overtakes were possible here, but perhaps with how the rest of the track wasn't so conducive to passing, drivers may have thought that that corner was the best place to try and make a move stick. Then it's on to what is technically turn 2. A small straight that isn't quite straight leads you to what was perhaps surprisingly a really troublesome corner. Several drivers were caught out by this 90-degree left-hander, with several heading for the outside wall. Just past turn 2 is the entry to the pit lane, and when I mean just past turn 2, I really do mean just past turn 2, as you'll have to compromise your typical corner exit speed if you want to make the pit lane entry. The pit lane itself runs on the inside of what was turn 3, with the exit merging on the outside of the tight chicane I showed you at the beginning. Although you don't go below the white line, otherwise you'll get a penalty, as had that not have been there, cars could have merged back immediately onto the racing line, creating some unwarranted collisions. However, we still haven't gone over the final turn, which is yet another 90-degree left-hander. But again, this one too was tricky on its own, yet it's probably better known for creating some track blocking pile-ups, one of which would give Macau a good run for its money. Once you've gotten round there, it's a short straight before crossing the finish line to complete one frantic lap of the Nashville Street Circuit. A track so crazy, even Scott Dixon had an ultra-rare moment of demonstrating that, like the rest of us, he is human. However, this circuit was going to no longer be usable after 2023 due to the NFL stadium alongside it being reconstructed. Yet that didn't mean that racing would be ending there. In fact, if anything, the Music City Grand Prix was going to be getting even bigger for 2024. The bridge would still be used, but now the track would go along famous landmarks of Nashville, such as Broadway for example. The layout seemed a little more straightforward, yet at the same time would perhaps yield more realistic overtaking areas, thanks to the use of wider roads. What's more, this circuit would be used for this year's IndyCar season finale, and was said to be a can't-miss action-packed event that transforms the NTT IndyCar Series season finale and elevates it to an even higher peak on the global stage, said Mark Miles. Except, plans changed. combination of the new NFL stadium being constructed, how race teams didn't have enough space, and how there wouldn't be proper access for residences and businesses would lead to the end, for now, of the Nashville street circuit. Now that's not to say that there won't be a return to the streets of Nashville in the future. However, if they did, it would more than likely not be using the course that I've just shown you. That's not to say though that a replacement location in Nashville was found, as whilst this event is still the season finale, it's now being held at the Nashville Superspeedway. Now, I'm not going to lie, when the change was announced, this is what my brain thought of it. Yes! A large oval to end the season! A superspeedway! This is amazing! Okay, calm down, that's enough of that. In all seriousness though, whilst this isn't a good thing for the series per se for a change like this to occur, it seemed like the response from the majority of fans was one of jubilation. I was very happy to see the change, but that's not because it's replacing the street circuit, but more how we've got a second large oval on the Indycar calendar this year. But then, that's not to say I prefer ovals over street tracks either. Personally, a good street track can provide just as much action as an oval, particularly for the IndyCar series. And I must say, I didn't despise this circuit. Some aspects I was less of a fan of than others, but on the whole, I quite enjoyed watching cars go around there. In fact, one of my underrated highlights of the motorsport calendar in recent years was watching the first GT America race at the Nashville Street Circuit. Watching a couple of dozen GT3 and GT4 cars charge their way around this tight, unforgiving street circuit with the light gradually fading, nearing nighttime, was a really cool spectacle. And I'd have loved to have been a spectator whilst those races were on, as I imagine they were pretty awesome in person. Plus, whoever came up with that idea, whether that be one or multiple people, are absolute geniuses. I hope we see something like this in the future. On the whole though, this seemed like a really cool event to attend in person, and it was certainly a unique challenge for drivers to overcome. However, I think this circuit will long live in everyone's memory for being the track where IndyCar components were regularly torn apart, and where carnage and chaos reigned supreme. Yeah, with that being said, that's going to be the end of this video. Thank you very much for watching. What are your thoughts on the Nashville Street Circuit? Are you sad to see it go? Or do you think it was nothing more than a place where race car parts came to rather sour conclusions? Say down in the comment section below. Plus, if you did enjoy this video, then I would be enormously appreciative if you did hit the like and subscribe buttons. Until the next video though, be kind to each other and enjoy the rest of your day.